All right, we're in the Rethinking Church, Rethinking the Church. You can go on to the next chapter 4 is where we are now, and this is the chapter on rethinking ministry. So we know that what we do as a church and what matters to us as a church should be ministry. This is the reaching out and touching lives to bring about change and to bring about hope and to help people through their various situations. We'll move forward one there, Austin, and see the traditional approach to ministry. This is what has gone on in churches for many, many years, and is still a vast majority of the churches today. The first part is to begin with a program. To begin with a program, this is a program-based design of church is what most churches follow. And it means that ministries are based on programs and have been, these programs have not necessarily been original. Maybe they were imported from other churches. Maybe they're original, or maybe they're denominational programs handed down from conventions and associations, and sometimes pushed as a must-do for churches. And some of the programs meet a need, but many are followed by churches out of loyalty to the denomination or pressure from the denomination, or even as copycat ministries. We see, well, that worked so well over there at that church, so let's do it over here, when our situation over here may be totally different and God may be calling us to do something different. So we have to be very careful. But that's how most ministry takes place in churches. It begins with a program. In the second part, you find some people. So you have a program. Now we've got to find some people who match this program. Some people who will fit in, who can run the program. And usually the only information those people are given is the name of the program and maybe a job description. I think this is where we're guilty a lot of times as churches, when we go to people, and it's that time of year when our nominating committee is at work, but we are guilty sometimes of going to people and saying, we really need you to fill this position because nobody else wants to do it. Now, doesn't that make you feel important? We really want you to do this because nobody else wants to do it. Besides, it's not going to take much time, and it's not a very difficult job. It's really pretty simple. Now, what does that say about that ministry? It doesn't put a lot of value on it, does it?
It's actually dumbing it down.
It dumbs it down? Yeah. Yeah, and we're doing that because we feel the pressure to fill the slots. And that piece of paper with the slots filled is what's most important to us. We have to be very careful about that. The third aspect to traditional approach to ministry is selling the program. After the program has been staffed, you then promote it to the church as the next best thing since sliced bread. It's what we've got to do. You're asked to support it because it's good and it's important. It may or may not meet a need, but once it's in place, the program really becomes the need. We have to keep feeding the program. And people are challenged to get behind the program in order to see success. So for the program to be successful, we got to get more people involved. Never mind that we didn't pray about this and that we didn't seek God's guidance and just started this program because some other church did well with it or because some denominational person told us it was a good idea to do. But now we are not seeing a lot of results. We just need more people, or we need to put more money into it, or we need to get more staffing. And then number 4 is to carry on the program. Carry it out. Church members do the program and let the program do the ministry. And so what church members become who staff these programs, what they become familiar with is the program, not so much the ministry that we should be training and making disciples to carry out. But we learned the program, we learned the XYZ program, whatever we want to call it. And, you know, if we do the program right, the program will do the ministry for us. In reality, the program may not take care of any of the needs and the objectives of the ministry. And then once we have carried out or begin carrying out the program, the next thing is maintaining the program. You know, once we get it going, if we stop, it's a failure. It has to continue till Jesus comes. I mean, that's the attitude we have about a lot of programs. We've got to do it. When the fact is, many times, a program, it gets to the point where it's not necessarily needed for the original purpose it was intended. So, no matter what, we maintain the program, and if we eliminate it, then we're saying we give up, and we're not going to focus on that area of ministry anymore. But as long as the program's there, no matter how well it's doing, no matter what it's accomplishing, then we're okay because we're doing ministry. That's the traditional approach to ministry. All right, let's move forward, Austin. Rethinking ministry, on the other hand, is where we are now. And we see that Webster's definition of ministry is that which serves. Therefore, a ministry is that which actually meets a need, and for a need to be met, there are two things. First of all, it has to be a real need. A real need. We can't meet a need if it's not really there. For example, I want to start a home for unwed mothers. What is the obvious need that must exist? Have to have unwed mothers who need a place. Right. So you've got to make sure there's a real need that you're starting. When I was in the last church that I served, our area had a homeless problem that a lot of people didn't want to admit existed. And we had a ministry that ministered to the homeless. And there were still needs. I mean, we had literally hundreds of people who flocked to that area because it was a resort area, and there were a lot of jobs in the summertime. They would come, and then once the jobs dried up, during the off season, they were without work or home. And the thing is, that's not good for the Visitors Bureau, the convention people, and the people who advertise the tourist industry to admit that there's a homeless problem. So the only people who really were able to minister to these homeless people were those who admitted there was a problem and were willing to tackle it. And so we need to admit that the problem is real. We need to admit there's a real need. Secondly, we need a person or resource who can effectively meet that need. So there's a need over here for to help someone with homelessness. We need a facility, a person who knows either what it's like to be homeless or what it's like to minister to the homeless, and all the different needs they have to be involved in this ministry if we're going to meet the need. It's not enough to have a burden for the homeless. We need to recognize a real need, and we need someone to meet that need. And so with the other example of unwed mothers, we need a place to provide them housing, lodging, and we need a staff that can meet their specific needs, because they're going to be very different, say, than the general homeless population. So, got to have a need, a real need, and someone or something that can effectively meet that need. If you have a need in the community for people who can't get to church, and it's a real need because they don't have transportation, they can't drive. Maybe they're children, maybe they're seniors, but they don't, it's a real need, you recognize that. What kind of solution do you have for that need? A bus ministry, yeah. Or at least people willing to go and pick up other people and bring them to church. It's not enough to recognize the need and have a burden for that need and say, okay, we'll drop off cab money for them each week. We need the resources that actually help meet that need, because the cab money may or may not meet the need. They may take a cab or they may not use that money for that. So the real need is get the transportation. So the real solution is going to be providing the people and resources to make that happen, to get them where they need to go. All right, let's move forward. So if we want to recognize that effective ministries can happen, we need to realize that they're usually based on the knowledge of needs and the interests of the people we're trying to reach. Okay? The most effective ministry in the church are those that are based on knowledge of needs and interests of people the church is trying to reach and trying to minister to. So, if I'm in an upscale neighborhood where everybody drives luxury vehicles, a bus ministry is not going to be the kind of ministry that's going to be effective there. Does that make sense? We have to recognize that in order for us to make a difference, because those people need ministering to as well, but in a different way. So we need to recognize what their needs are, what their interests are, and address those in trying to minister to them. All right? So let's move forward there, Austin. Negative results can take place in a church when people are forced into roles they're not suited for. There's no joy in serving God when it's done for the wrong reasons, White says. No joy in serving God when it's done for the wrong reasons. You ever known anybody who was a servant in the church, maybe even a minister, and they seemed like they were miserable all the time? Think about it. There are people like that, people who are serving, and by golly, I'm going to serve you if it kills me. Maybe they're complaining constantly about what they're doing for the Lord. There's no joy in that. And most of the time that happens because people are doing things they're not equipped to do. They're trying to do ministries they haven't been equipped to do or gifted to do. Instead, there may be some niche in the church they haven't discovered yet where they can truly make a difference. So, the Bible teaches 3 important truths about gifts and ministry. First of all, the Bible teaches that every Christian is a minister. Every Christian, not just the ordained clergy, not just the deacons, but every Christian is a minister. And so we don't have a hierarchy of ministers in the church. It's not like you have the pastor, and then you have the deacons, and then you have your Sunday school teachers, and then you have, all the way down to the person who sits on the pew and doesn't have another job. That's not the way it works. Every Christian is a minister. And I remember one of the most influential things I noted in college at a church I attended was the bulletin. And you know how a lot of times down here on the front it'll say minister and the person's name. And what it said on the front of that bulletin was minister, every member of the church. We're all ministers. We are all called to do ministry. So that's the first important truth we need to recognize. Every one of us is called to be a minister. Secondly, at conversion, when God saves us, we are given at least one spiritual gift that is intended to be used for ministry. God gives each person at least one spiritual gift. And so, well, I don't know what mine is. Then we need to go through a process to discover what that is. Maybe you know what your spiritual gift is. You know where God wants to use you. The next step is following through and being obedient. Because we can't please God if we're not serving in the area where He's called us. And we're going to be miserable if we try to serve outside of the area where He's called us. So the Bible teaches, that's the third point. The Bible teaches that we're to operate in the area of our gifts. So, my gift may be cooking food, hospitality, helping in the kitchen, doing those type things. But I can't carry a tune in a bucket. If that's the case, then my area of spiritual giftedness for me to operate within is not the choir loft. Okay? It's in the kitchen. It doesn't make me any less than the people in the choir loft. Think about it. I control what they eat anyway, right? No, but we really have to see what our spiritual gift is, and we have to operate within that area. It only makes sense. I mean, that's the way we do at our jobs, isn't it? We go to work and say you go to work in a factory and you're given an aptitude test of sorts and they determine that you would be a good welder. You've got experience in welding, you've got talent there, you've got work to show for what you've done in the past, you've got good references in welding. Have absolutely no experience whatsoever as a plumber. They're not going to make you a plumber. They're going to make you a welder. And you're going to be miserable trying to do plumbing when you know that you're a great welder. It's the same way in the church when we serve the Lord. Maybe you just have a gift of encouragement. You're great about encouraging other people. That's a powerful and strong gift. Maybe it's prayer. What better gift is there? I mean, pray for people, to pray with them. Maybe it is music or working in the kitchen. Maybe it's teaching. Maybe it's working with children. Maybe it's helping with security. There are so many different things that are needed within the church. And we shouldn't expect only a handful of people to have to do them all, because when we do, that handful of people are going to they're going to have to work outside of their area of expertise. Why not let them focus on what matches their spiritual gift and find within the church other people who are gifted in other areas? And so we do that through a ministry development process, Austin. The goal is to create a process, White says, by which effective ministry is created, implemented, and sustained. Though the specifics will take various forms within individual churches, the following steps are integral to rethinking and the development of a new ministry process. Okay, here are the steps White gives us. First of all, start with a need. Start with a need. A ministry should not be considered, he says, unless it meets a specific need in the life of the church. A strategy for listening to people must be in place in order to determine the needs of a church. A question as simple as, how can the church better suit you or serve you and your family's needs can revolutionize a church. Needs are discovered through effective listening. You know, that sounds simple, but it's a problem that most people have, is we don't listen very well. We don't mind talking, and we like to talk and tell our story and tell about our needs, but to stop and listen and hear the needs of others, that's how we develop a plan for ministry. To start with a need. Secondly, meet the need with the mission. Many, many needs can be identified. If we were to survey everyone in our congregation, there's no doubt we would have probably 100 or maybe 200 different needs identified. You know, what is a need that you see that our church can help meet? What is a need in our community or in your family or in your life? So we can identify a lot of needs. But how many of those needs fall under the purpose and the mission of the church? That's where we have to be careful, because we can use all of our resources, all of our time, all of our efforts meeting needs that are not part of our mission as a church. So what is our goal? If our goal is to reach people for Jesus, and in order to do that, we've got to share the gospel with them, there may be some opportunity out there for us to go and do something good that a civic group might be better suited for. If it's something that, say, we would be prohibited from sharing the gospel while we did it. So, what is the need and how does it match our mission? If we attempt to meet some needs, but they're not part of the mission of the church, we could end up hurting the reputation of the church or the mission of the church. I've told y'all about my friend up in New York that pastors in Syracuse. And, God put his church right on the street corner, and he's surrounded by 4 strip clubs. And one of their ministries is they have ladies who go into the strip clubs and serve as chaplains to the dancers. And they've seen lives changed as a result. But if we saw that, if God suddenly put strip clubs all around us here, and we said, okay, we're going to send the pastors out to the strip clubs and minister to these ladies, that would actually hurt the church, wouldn't it? It would hurt the reputation of the church. You have to be very careful. His church is in a location where God has put them. I mean, God slammed every door in their face when they thought they had property, when they thought they had a place to meet. And he opened this door over and over and over and put them there. And so they know, they're convinced that's part of their mission, is reaching out and ministering to these women in the strip clubs and to the ladies who work the street around them. And they're facing an uphill battle sometimes with the people they're having to deal with who employ these ladies. But they've actually had very good success with the owners of some of these clubs at reaching, being allowed to come in. At first it was, we'll let them come over there to see you. Then it was, well, you can come in and sit in the back table. And now they're going into the dressing room and ministering to them. And they're seeing women leave the business. They're seeing them come to the Lord. And they're helping them along the way. They're meeting a real need. But it's definitely not a need that every church is called to meet. So it would be possible for us to actually do damage if we realized that we were trying to meet a need that wasn't part of our mission as a church. We need to keep our mission and the need matched. Another thing is we have limited resources. We would like there are a lot of things we would like to do. We could identify a need in this community, maybe a big need, and we could figure out a way to minister to that need. But if that need took every bit of our resources as a church and we weren't able to pay the light bill, then we would be doing damage, right? That would be hurting the church. So we've got to make sure that the need is a need that God has called us to minister to. Now, if that's the case, then I have no doubts that every need is going to be met. Every bill is going to be paid. Whether we know where the money's coming from or not, God will provide it. Because if we're faithful and we trust Him and step out on faith and do the things He calls us to do, He's going to meet our needs. He's going to make sure we have the resources that we need. And so, only when a ministry meets a need and supports its purpose and mission should the church pursue that need. The third step is probably one of the most difficult for us, frustrating even, and that is to wait for a leader. Wait is not a word we like very much, is it? When it comes to anything. Wait for a leader. See, when we have a ministry that's important enough to staff, we need to make sure it's staffed with the right people. The people who are, first of all, called of God, and the ones who are Spirit-filled. The ones He's called and the ones He's filled to fulfill that need, to meet that need. So if a need matches our purpose and mission, the temptation is going to be to immediately launch whatever ministry we see that we need to be a part of and there, and not necessarily to have all our bases covered, so to speak. Not to have the right people in place. So it's possible to do the right ministry and not have the right people in place. And maybe we're doing the right thing, but the ministry will suffer if the right people are not there. The people God has intended to serve in that ministry. And the people who are involved in that ministry are going to suffer as well. They'll get frustrated. They'll get hurt, angry. We have to be very careful, make sure we wait for the right person or persons. And the fourth part is to build according to giftedness. See, God made all of us certain ways. He's given us all abilities. He's given us all talents. When we serve in the way that He intends us to and use the gifts that He's given us, then we'll find pleasure in that, as will God. God will be pleased, and we will be pleased in that service. So we must build ministry teams according to giftedness. The process of finding the right people to serve in a particular ministry involves what we talked about already, this discovering spiritual gifts and then matching people who have those gifts with a particular ministry and particular role. And when we follow that approach, White says a church will have teachers teaching, leaders leading, administrators administrating, and counselors counseling. Sounds simple, makes sense, but we don't always do it, and we usually don't. The fifth step is to review regularly. Review regularly. All ministry should be evaluated on an ongoing basis. We should determine whether we're meeting the needs we set out to meet in the beginning. Is the ministry still accomplishing the task that it was called to accomplish? Do we still have the right team in place to serve? If we find that our goals are not being met with the ministry, the people aren't being they're not receiving pleasure from serving, or the people we're intending to help are not being helped, or we're not even attracting those people to those ministries anymore, then maybe it's time to try a different ministry, to move on to something else. At the very least, it may be time to suspend a ministry and do more in-depth research to determine if it's needed to continue. And as important as this is, it's really kind of rare. Most churches don't take the time to review what they're doing. They don't evaluate. Instead, the ministry becomes a monument. It's something that we can say with pride, we've done it for X number of years. It may not be serving many people. It may not be making any kind of difference at all. But we've been doing it for X number of years, and we have great pride in that. What about God? How is He honored with this ministry? That should be part of the real evaluation. How is God being honored? How are people being served? How are they being led to the Lord? And so, all right, we can move on to the next one. Henry Ford actually built an empire based on the Model T. You can move on to the next one, Austin. He built an empire based on the Model T automobile. But the thing is that the automobile itself, the car, was not the big deal. You know what it was, right? It was not the car that made it so wonderful. It was the process of building the car. See, by that time, cars were being built by hand, very slowly, and in varied ways, maybe even considered haphazardly. But Henry Ford established a new manufacturing process known as the assembly line. And we know what that is. But in 1913, when he perfected it, it was a new thing. And it allowed him to triple his production immediately. He tripled production of the Model T, and the demand became even greater because of all the cars that were coming out and the popularity. And in 1924, you could buy a Model T for $290. But then, after a while, people began to ask for Model Ts of different colors because they were all black. And you know what Henry Ford told them was, you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black. Okay? So eventually sales began to decline. And Henry Ford realized that he was going to have to rethink his process of producing automobiles. Even though he had come up with this great invention and was producing cars at a tremendous rate, the needs of the people changed. Once everybody had a black Model T, people began wanting something different. They wanted to be different, to stand out from everyone else. And so his any color you want as long as it's black policy went away. And as you know, he's continued, his company has continued today and has made a lot of different vehicles since then, some good, some not so good. But rethinking ministry sometimes means, giving up our attitude that you can have it any way you want to as long as it's black. Giving up that attitude and saying, there is a need here. And it is different than anything I've ever encountered. Or there is some value in the criticism I'm hearing about this particular ministry. It's not meeting the needs it should be meeting. It needs to be evaluated, maybe changed, or maybe jettisoned altogether. We have to be very careful to be faithful to God, not just when He calls us to a ministry, but as we continue in that ministry. Well, I've done it for 50 years. Maybe that was the time frame God had on that ministry. Maybe He has something different for the next 50 years in mind. Maybe we need to change and move to that. Or maybe we need to look at the personnel. Maybe the staffing needs to change to make this particular ministry match the gifts of those who are serving